Sembene was born January 1st, 1923 and died on June 9th, 2007. Sembene is an African film director, producer, screenwriter, actor, and author. Sembene's family brought him up in a Syrian religion which influenced him in some of his works later in life. His grandmother was also a big influence on Sembene, which is why we see in so many films women are important characters. As a young boy, Sembene worked with his father, who was a fisherman, until Sembene moved to Danker and worked different manual jobs. In 1944, Sembene was drafted into the Senegalese Tirailleurs until he later joined the French forces during World War II. After he was done fighting in the war, he moved back home to participate in the railroad strike, which was another influence in Sembene's life when writing his book, God's Bits of Wood. He then moved to France, where he worked in a factory on the docks, joined the communist-led CGT and the Communist Party to stop the shipment of weapons to the French colonial war. Sembene was shaped his whole life by colonialism because he was born in a French-ruled country, which meant he went to a French colonial school until he was kicked out for fighting a teacher when he had a disagreement. Sembene had so many different experiences with so many different people while growing up that he decided to start writing about them and came out with his first book called The Black Docker in 1965. This book was interesting because it looked at racism that African immigrants were facing and all the ways that were being mistreated. The book took place on the docks at Marseille, where Sembene had worked earlier in his life, and tells how he was treated during his time there. Sembene always wrote in a social, realistic mode to bring awareness to the problems that he's seen around the world. His second book focused on a black farmer with a white wife who was murdered after fighting back against the French colonial government and the village social standards. His third book was on the strike that took place that got home after the war and showed people how oppressed Africans were with having almost no rights of their own country. After this third book, he wrote a short fiction collection, and one of them was influence for his film called Hammerat, which was Africans fighting for independence in one of their capitals. He was successful in everything he did and wanted to spread his work all over the world, so he decided to move from writing books to writing movie scripts and producing. He studied film in 1962 at Gorky Film Studio under director Mark Donskoy. Sembene created many influential films that showed the elites controlling, oppressing everyone, colonialism, and the strength of African women. He is considered one of the leading figures on African post-colonial literature, also called the father of African film. Sembene focused on the racial and economic oppression in his early books, but then began to focus on the corrupt African elites. Everything Sembene wrote or produced was based on experience he had in his life, which is why his book and films are so important and interesting. They let the world know the problems like racism, Senegalese veterans coming home from war, oppressions, religious tensions, government corruption, and so many more problems.